Hello code artists, welcome to lesson 5 of our introductory programming logic using JavaScript course. This lesson is all about looping logic. So we're going to look at while loops, C-style for loops, nesting loops, nesting logic, and I'm going to show you some cool things that you can do with return statements. So let's get started. As usual, please pause the video really quick and have a read of what the requirements of this code is for this lesson, and I'll sit here and wait while you read it. Okay, welcome back. I assume that you've finished reading what we're covering today here for the Herder School. So as we do for our other lessons, we need to pick out our constants and we need to pick out our variables, and then we'll decide what's going to be global and what's going to be local, etc. So anytime you typically see hard and fast numbers like 8, 3, 80, 60, etc., those are probably going to be your constants because they give you the actual value there. And then all of the rest of the stuff are going to be variable data because they can change. So I'm going to paste in right here what I picked out as the global constants and variables that we need for our code. So let me Control C and Control V, and there we go. So I have max grade is 8 because that's what we have here. Max month was 9 because they're only in the school for 9 months, and max classroom is 3 because there are 3 classrooms per grade level. And then as usual, I like to prompt them, do you want to continue? And so I have my standard pseudo boolean continue response right here. And then I have some numeric values, current grade, current classroom, and month number. And this is what we're going to use as we go through our nesting loop. So as usual, we're going to come down here and I'm going to paste in our first mutator method. It's going to be for continue response, and that's going to have our first look at a new way to do input validation. Control C, Control V. Alright, so we've got our set continue response, and if you'll notice it says if continue response equals 1 or continue response equals 0, then I drop into that block right there, because if that's a true statement, I'll drop into here, and then I'll say continue response is equal to do you want to continue 0 for no, 1 for yes. Then I have a loop here, and a while loop is similar to an if statement except that it will repeat itself unless you created a condition on the inside of the loop that can allow this test right here to become false. So the test is, while continue response is not equal to 0 and continue response is not equal to 1, meaning they typed in a 3 or an X or something that wasn't a 0 or 1, then I will keep looping in here until they type in either a 0 or a 1. That's the whole point of this loop right here. And it breaks out as soon as they type in a 0 or 1. So that's what makes this from becoming an infinite loop. Now, as I did in a previous lesson, the first time this comes in, continue response, as you know, the value is undefined because I didn't assign it a value up here. So the first time this runs, I automatically set it to 1 so that up here in my main method, the first time the code runs, they aren't asked, do you want to continue? Well, of course they want to continue because they just fired the program up. So that's why I did it like that. So please study this code right here and ensure that you understand what's happening. We have an outer if statement with a while loop nested inside of it, and then there's a default else if this doesn't happen to be true. Alright, next up is our, let's see, what's the next one we're doing is month. So I'm going to Control C, come down here, Control V, and here's where I'm setting month number, and I am saying in here if month number is not equal to null, and this is a good check to make sure it's not equal to null, which it is the first time this runs, and month num is less than or equal to max month, I increment month num by 1, otherwise I set it to 1. I can't really increment it by 1 in a lot of languages if it's null, because you'll get an error message saying use of an uninitialized variable, or in JavaScript it would be unassigned because you did initialize it when you declared it, but assigning it a value. I know this is using JavaScript, but I'm trying to make it fairly language agnostic so that regardless of what language you're using, you get into good habits of making sure that your variables are assigned before you start, trying to work with them, so you don't get error messages. So that's all that I'm doing right here, is making sure if it is null, then I just automatically set the month num to 1. Notice there's no validation in this method because I'm not asking the user for any input. This just simply increments the month by 1 every time the method runs, or it assigns it 1 the first time it runs without any user input. Okay, so then the next method that we're looking at is set current month. And what this is a way for me to take the current month number right here, the month number, and convert it to string. And I did it so that you could see another use of the switch case logic. And I do have a little question up here for you, so as we go through the code, please be thinking about this. How could you refactor this method to eliminate the need for this local variable right here, set current month? And I'll give you a hint. The answer is in a method that we have down below. So all this is saying right here is that if the global variable month num is 1, set this variable current month to September. Otherwise, if it's 2, set it to October. Now I know this in most people's mind would be January, but remember this is a school year that runs 9 months. So I'm just saying the first month that they're in session is September, the second month that they're in session is October, etc. You get the idea. It should probably never hit this, but I just put it in there for good measure, this default. You never know, and this is such a simple program, it would never happen. But if you see this, then something's really, really wrong. Alright, and I have some console logging here that I would not leave in the final product, but I have it in here so that you can see what current month is as the program runs. And then there's this new keyword here. You'll notice it's a keyword in JavaScript because it's orange. This is typeof. This is going to tell me what this variable type is, like Boolean, string, number, etc. And every time this runs, it's going to say number with lowercase. But really what I'm doing right here is I need this final return statement right here to return whatever current month is, because I'm going to call this method right here later on in a string that I print out to the user for the tickets. So this whole method right here is designed to just simply convert the month number into a word and then return whatever word it is to the caller of this function. And you'll see it used later on down the line. Alright, next one up is current grade. Control C, Control V, and as you saw up above with month, this is just setting the current grade. If it happens to be null, then I'm going to set it to 0 for kindergarten. That's what I'm using to signify kindergarten. Otherwise, I'm going to add 1 to it. And another console log here that I would not leave in here for the final code. And notice there's no return statement in this one because I'm actually just running this method in the while loop. You'll see how I use it down below when I go to print the final coupons for the school. Alright, next one up is current classroom, which is going to look exactly like current grade, just the numbers were a little different. So again, this looks just like what we saw up here, so we're just going to move on. Next one up is set the upper tuition. And that's for grades that are higher than kindergarten. Those upper grade tuitions are priced differently, as you saw in the code requirement. So I'm going to paste it down here. And notice what I do here. I have a base tuition of 60 for the upper tuition. And that is part of this requirement down here where it's $60 monthly for the upper grades. I didn't need this to be a global constant because it's only used right here in this method. And notice that I don't have a local variable. I just simply return whatever the value is by doing the math of base tuition times current grade. I return that to whoever calls this method right here, set upper tuition. And I kind of give you that note here. So hint, hint, that might help you answer this question right here as you go through and look at this method and how you would refactor it so that it didn't need a local variable. Alright, I'm going to do one little method here before we get into the main meat of this program, and that's just simply a little utility method that prints goodbye. And you'll see in the main method that I actually use a C-style for loop to print this 3 times, but I just wanted to get that out of the way. All this does is print goodbye to the screen. Now, let's take a look at the actual magic of this program, and there's a lot to discuss here. So I'm going to Control-C, Control-V, and I'm going to try to get everything else out of the way. I'll even, alright, move it up towards the top. Okay, so what we have here are our other constants, max grade, max classroom, and kindergarten tuition. And you'll notice that I have those up here as well, max grade, max month, and max classroom. And here I have max, and so I did not need those 2. Alright, there we go. Now we're back at it. It was just a mistake on my part where I refactored them back out because I'm using them up here as well. So I had to take them out of being local and make them global. Alright, so I've got kindergarten tuition. Now I say, and this happens in a cascading fashion, while current grade is less than or equal to max grade. Then the very next thing it does is it hits this curly brace and it runs the next line. Then, while current classroom is less than or equal to max classroom. Well, if that's true, then I jump down and come into here. While month num is less than or equal to max month. And max month was 9, and max classroom was 3, and max grade was 8. And these are all set to 0, 1, and 1. So these are all true. Then I come down and say if current grade is equal to 0 or kindergarten, then I run this line right here. The tuition for the month, and here's where I get that return statement putting the value here of set current month. So it's going to put the actual month name here. So the tuition for the month, we'll say the first one was September for classroom 1 of grade 0, and since it's kindergarten, it should say kindergarten tuition, which if you remember is right here, is $80. So it's going to print that out. Then once we move past kindergarten, and this is no longer true, then we come right here and it says the current tuition for month and set current month. So it'll say September, October, November as we go through each time because it's returning that value right here where I return current month to the caller. For classroom, for grade is set upper tuition. And that's where I simply do the math, where I do the base tuition times the grade level and return it. And whatever that value is just simply gets put right here. So that's how that happens. Now, I'd like you to think about how I have this logic here. Remember how I said try to have the highest level of truthiness up towards the top? And it's not super important for a little if statement like this, but still, kindergarten is going to go far less than all these other grades that go all the way up to 8th grade. So think about how you could rewrite this little section right here to push the highest level of truth towards the top. Okay, so once it gets done doing its if block right there, then it comes down and it runs the set month num method, and then it comes back in and tests. So this is going to run many more times than this one does, but once this sets the month num outside of this value of truthiness, then it jumps out to this block and does these two and tests right here. And then once it's done making these values untrue. Then it hits this curly brace and runs these and winds up out here doing this test. And it just keeps doing this way more than the middle, which is way more than the out, until all the tickets are printed. And then I get to this curly brace and the test is no longer true all the way out on the outer. And then I hit this curly brace and the method is done. So that's how you nest logic inside of these loops, and this is how we do a nested if statement way deep in there. So it's supremely important that you understand how this particular method is running right here and what happens when it gets to these curly braces right here, and then this curly brace right here, and then this one. Notice that this set month is still inside of the while loop right there, so that I can eventually make this test false so I don't get an infinite loop. And notice that these two are inside of this while loop's curly brace, so this won't become an infinite loop. So you get the idea. Okay, so the last thing that we need to look at is our main method, how we call it, and in there I get to show you a C-style for loop as well. So let me come back up to the main method here, which isn't all that big, and I'm going to Control C and paste it in here. And just like I did in my last lesson, first thing I do is set continue response, and since its value right now is undefined, this is not true right here, so it drops down to the else and makes it 1. Since it's 1, it will then come right in here because it says while continue response is equal to 1. So then it just drops right in, and I set the month number, so I set the default values, and then I come down to process the payment coupons, which is that big nested while loop. And then the last thing I do to ensure this doesn't become an infinite loop is I ask them again, do you want to continue, yes or no? So the second time I ask, if you come down here, well, this is a 1 already because the first time it ran through we set it to 1 because it was undefined, so we set it to 1. So then I simply ask them, do you want to continue 0 or 1? And if they do 3 or 7, I just keep looping until I get a 0 or a 1. Then I loop back around, and if they put a 1 in, we go through it all over again, but if they put a 0 in, we're done. And I hit this curly brace and I drop down to the next statement, which is a C-style for loop. And a C-style for loop is good for when you have a finite amount of looping that you kind of have in your head that you know that you need to do. So what it is it goes in this order. This happens the first time. You declare a little variable. I is typically the convention for incrementer or iterator or whatever you want to use, but I is typically the convention that's used for the first outer for loop. If you do inner ones, then it goes J, K, etc. Alright, so I say I is equal to 0. Then I come over and do this next. As long as I is less than max classroom, which was 3, then I drop down here and do this. Once it's done doing this, I hit this. Then I do this. I increment I by 1, and we come to here next. This only happens the very first time the for loop runs. Then all that happens is this, 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 then this, until this test right here is no longer true. And once it's no longer true, I hit this, I'm out, and I'm done. Okay, so that's it for loops and return logic. Again, please think about how to refactor this to get rid of the local variable. Hint, it is right here is how you would do it. And then also please think about how you would refactor that to push the highest level of truthiness up. Alright, thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.